This next video is going to introduce you to whole and half steps on the keyboard. Whole and half steps are an important concept to understand because they're really the building blocks for creating scales, intervals, and chords, which we'll learn about later in the term. In addition, learning about the whole and half steps is kind of the first step to finding out what those black key names are. We've covered white key names, but not the black keys yet. So half and whole steps are where we'll start for that. A half step could be described as looking at a key on the keyboard and going directly to the key next door. So if I choose a key on the keyboard, such as D, I always like D as my starting note. So we have D in between the group of two black keys. A half step above D would take you to this black key right next door. So in other words, if I go to this white key, I actually have skipped a key on the keyboard, and that would make it a whole step. Instead, we're looking at half steps, so whatever is right next door. And depending on which key you start with, that could mean that you're moving to a black key, or it could mean that you're moving to a white key. So from D, a half step up would be this black key, the top black key in the group of two. If I'm on D and I move down a half step, that again would take me to a black key, which is right next door to D. However, I could start on a different note, such as E. If I start on E, then if I move up a half step, I'll actually be on F, the white key. There's no black key here to go to, so F is the key directly next door. If I'm on E and I go down by a half step, then I would be on the black key next door. So whenever you're moving by half steps, you're playing one key at a time, not skipping, moving directly next door. If I play a series of half steps, I just played from C to C, full octave, and I didn't skip any keys. I played every single one. This would be moving by half steps. We call that a chromatic scale. I could also go down and do the same thing. Going from the higher to the lower notes on the keyboard. So half steps are right next door. Now a whole step is basically a combination of two half steps. So instead of going directly to the key next door, we're actually going to skip a key. So back to D. If I start with D and I move up a whole step, I will skip the black key and go to E instead. So D and E are a whole step apart. Same thing if I move backward and go down from D. A half step would be the black key, but a whole step will skip the black key and go to the white key below it, C, instead. Most of the white keys that are on the keyboard are a whole step apart because most of them have a black key that separates them. However, there are a couple areas on the keyboard that you need to be aware of because they can be tricky when we're talking about whole steps and half steps. Those areas would be between B and C, and between E and F. These are the places on the keyboard where there's not a black key in between, so these white keys happen to be a half step apart. If I wanted to move by a whole step, say if I started on C, and I want to go a whole step down, I have to skip over the white key and go to the black key instead. Whole steps always bypass a key. So from C down to this top black key in the group of three, that would be a whole step. Most of the black keys are a whole step apart, so the group of two, they're a whole step apart because they skip this white key. And the group of three, each one of these is skipping a white key, so it's a whole step apart. There's also a sound difference between the whole steps and half steps. If I were to play some of these different types of steps, you'll hear a little bit of a difference. A lot of people think that both half steps and whole steps sound dissonant. In other words, the sound is clashing and the notes seem like they don't go together. But the half step is a little bit more that way than the whole step. Here's an example of some half steps. The notes are so close together, but they're not the same, and that makes them sound a little bit more clashing. It doesn't matter where we play them on the keyboard. They're very, very close together in pitch. Almost identical, but not quite. The whole steps are a little bit further apart. So D to E, for example. Maybe a little bit less clashing. So they not only look different on the keyboard, but they have a little bit of a different sound as well when you're hearing them. One exercise that can be kind of a fun one to do is to navigate the keyboard by whole steps and half steps. So I'm going to try it here with you and we'll see how it works. If you have a keyboard at home, you can follow along with this, or even if you have a diagram of a keyboard, you don't necessarily have to hear the sound to play this exercise. So we're going to start on D. So find D on your keyboard. And as we play through this exercise, basically I'll be guiding you around the keyboard using whole and half steps. So this will test your knowledge of the whole steps and half steps. So as we play, as we go through these whole steps and half steps, I will not play. I'm just going to play the end note, and let's see if you end up on the same note that I do. So we're going to start with D. I want you to move up a whole step, down a half step, up a whole step, up a half step, up a whole step, and down a half step. Play your note. You should be on G. Let's try another one. We'll start on the middle black key in the group of 3 black keys. So from that black key, I want you to move down a whole step, down a whole step, down another whole step, up a half step, up a half step, up a whole step, and down a half step. And play your note. If you followed the whole and half steps correctly, that note should have been F that you ended up on. It's just kind of a fun exercise to play either with a friend. You can have a friend or someone you know guide you through the whole steps and half steps and see if you can follow it to the end.